Welcome to WDUR 1490 AM. You're listening to Leaders and Legends, and this is your host, Steve Rao, the Mayor Pro Tem of Morrisville. And we have in the house today Bob Giolis, the President and CEO of the Research Triangle Park Foundation. Bob, welcome here.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Well, we're just so delighted to have you on the show. And you are the CEO of RTP, but tell me a little bit about what brought you to North Carolina and your experience in research parks.
Well, sure. Thank you, Steve. Well, I grew up here in the area. I grew up in Raleigh. My parents were working class family. My father was a television repairman back in the day when people did that. But we were one of those families, like many, who experienced the transformation of this region. RTP largely had a lot to do with that. Ended up going to NC State University. When I graduated, I was engaged a lot in politics and government, ended up working in our state legislature with leaders like the Speaker of the House, and then with Governor Hunt. And it was actually Governor Hunt who encouraged me to pursue a job at NC State Centennial Campus. He knew that I had a passion for how we create stronger communities, more collaborative spaces, places that really fit the needs of people and help ultimately to create new jobs and economic growth. And so I went to work at Centennial Campus, and that's really where I found my passion. I had the privilege of leading Centennial Campus. We really took it from a startup to a well-known global brand. And then I did something I thought I'd never do, which is I left North Carolina, went to South Carolina, and ran a research park there for BMW and Clemson University around automotive technologies.
Well, fantastic. And so we're so glad that, I saw you years ago at the Centennial Campus, then wondered where you were. So you went to South Carolina and then you came back. So tell me real quickly, for those listening, what is the Research Triangle Park? Is it a city? Are we in it? I mean, what is the RTP?
Yeah, it's a great history. First of all, the Research Triangle Park is a 7,000-acre parcel of land. So to give people a sense of scale, that's about half the size of the island of Manhattan. It's the largest research park in all of North America. It has over 220 companies, nearly 50,000 people who work there or associated with working there directly in the park. But it is led by the Research Triangle Foundation, which is actually what I'm the president of. The foundation is the steward organization of RTP, and our mission is to do three things. We are to serve education, create meaningful work, and help lift up all the people of the state of North Carolina, which is a wonderful thing to get up and do every single day. It's a very powerful mission statement.
Wow, that's great. So I wanted to talk, I love when you give a historical perspective. So tell the story, if you could, of how the efforts to launch RTP began 50 years ago.
Yeah, so it really is a story, I think, of sort of pursuing your own destiny. North Carolina in the late 1950s was a state in a very desperate situation. We were a very, very poor state. In almost every measure, we ranked toward the very bottom. There really wasn't a lot of hope or opportunity for the people of North Carolina. Many of our graduates from our universities had no jobs here. They had to leave North Carolina in order to find work. So it took a group of leaders coming together. Governor Luther Hodges, who was a businessman, had worked with General Marshall in the rebuilding of Europe after the Second World War, and he understood the value of infrastructure. You had business leaders who knew something dramatic and big had to happen, and you had our university leaders who knew that our greatest resource in North Carolina was our people. And so they came together around a really audacious idea, which was to create a research park between the three universities of NC State, UNC, and Duke University. Now think about this. In the 1950s, there was only one other research park, and that was Stanford. So that's how new an idea this was. And what I love, my favorite story about the park's creation is that after they announced it, they actually had trouble initially getting companies to buy in. They had leveraged the land on options, but didn't have a way to pay the options off. It was through the work of Archie Davis, traveling around North Carolina and raising money from the private citizens of the state that paid off the debt on the land. About $15 million, the equivalent in today's money, was needed, and they raised every penny, paid off the debt. And ever since then, our commitment has been to serve the people of North Carolina, since really the park belongs to them.
So hence Davis Drive and the headquarters of Davis Drive, Archie Davis. So you learn something on these shows.
Yes, exactly.
The RTP headquarters is on Davis Drive.
Yeah, and he was a remarkable individual. I mean, he was a Moravian from Winston-Salem. He ended up becoming the president of Wachovia Bank, the president of the U.S. Bankers Association, the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I think the only person who's ever held both of those roles. He served in the North Carolina State Senate. But he was an amazing humanitarian. He believed greatly in the people of our state, and the park is a great manifestation of that.
Well, that's fantastic. And so before we break, just to give us a sense of the kinds of companies that are in the park today. I mean, could you just give us some names of, some?
Oh, well, we have some of the great multinational names that people know. Of course, IBM has a very historic connection with RTP as one of the first and largest companies, but Cisco's in our park today. GSK, Biogen, Fidelity, Credit Suisse.
And these were many companies that were recruited. They came here.
They were recruited and they came here. And the big attraction for them isn't the park per se. The attraction is the talent. It's the access to our universities. That's the heart and soul of what we do. Without our universities, RTP would be nothing but a big land deal.
It's a perfect example of how you can transform an economy by leveraging the universities, creating this pool of talent. Mm-hmm. And then Governor Hunt and then his successors were able to continue to recruit.
Oh yeah, it always has remained, and it still remains, a very bipartisan supported initiative. For one thing, the park, and this would interest people, we don't receive any state funding to operate Research Triangle Park. Our operations are completely associated with our private not-for-profit foundation. And then we serve the state, and we serve our secretaries of commerce and our governors by helping them to recruit big companies here. But one piece to remember, while we have big companies, also keep in mind that over 60% of the companies in our park, 220 plus companies, 60% of those have 20 employees or less. So while we have big multinationals, we have a very dynamic population of entrepreneurs and small business.
And that's a perfect way, as we're going to take a quick station break and we're going to come back and talk about entrepreneurship. We'll be right back.